My name is Nduta. I am a lawyer working in the energy sector with 9 years of experience in this particular sector. Currently, I am an Oxford Policy Fellow based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as an advisor to the State Department of Energy. My focus in this regard or in this role is the policy, legal, and regulatory reform of the power sector. So I was born and raised in Kenya, even though now I'm currently working in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a very interesting country, and there are aggressive efforts by the government to facilitate growth. And to be honest, the transformation is observable on an almost monthly basis. And it is I find that it's a very exciting time to be here. To be a small part of this feels very meaningful to me, and it's a huge privilege. After high school, I studied law. I did my undergraduate degree in law in Kenya. Thereafter, I proceeded to Scotland in the UK to do a master's in energy law and policy at the Centre for Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy. And then I did my LPC, my legal practice certification, or my bar qualification in Kenya. And over the years, I've done a number of professional courses and upskilling in the natural resources sector. My undergraduate degree, my experience in my undergraduate, which I took at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, it was very pleasant. I've always enjoyed reading. I like learning, so I didn't really struggle in that regard. My biggest challenge, I think, must have been when I started taking my master's program, and I found that the style of learning to be unfamiliar and foreign. And by this I mean, it was the first time that I was asked to, or required to, think for myself. The first time that I was required to come up with ideas, to defend my thinking, to conceptualize. And I found it challenging because up until that point, everything had been almost simply rote memory skills. And I found that challenging to begin with, but once I got into it, I realized it was good for me. It was a way for me to grow. Fitting into a different culture I think is always challenging. I was the only person in my class at the time who was coming from a country that did not produce petroleum. And everyone around me seemed to know what they were talking about with respect to petroleum resources and energy, and I felt like a fish out of water. Initially, I had wanted to study law and economics, and as I was reading about law and economics and what might be required of me, I came across energy economics, and this took me down the path I eventually chose because I found it very fascinating. I found it very interesting. And when I spoke to my parents about this, they were, graciously willing and able to pay my school fees. It is a very expensive course, and so that in itself propelled me to work as hard as I could, because I knew that big sacrifices were being made on my behalf. I suppose going back to the initial challenges I faced, it was also the first time I was dealing with non-lawyers in an academic setting. The way the program is designed is that you are in class with geologists, with economists, with people who have done MSCs, or at least who are science majors. And that can be a bit overwhelming, because you instantly feel like, wow, as a lawyer, can I compete with these people? And also the way the program is designed is that you do study some of some of these other disciplines. So you do study some economics, some geology, some other sciences in addition to the law. So I mean, ultimately, I think it's a very good thing that it's not restricted to only lawyers. But I found it a little bit at the beginning. I was not very sure that I would be able to compete, I suppose. Regarding my professional experience and journey, once I finished my LPC and was admitted as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, I started tarmacking, which is what we call it at home when you begin looking for jobs. You're literally on the tarmac, going from place to place, putting in your CV and hoping for the best. It was hard. It was scary. But eventually, I managed to secure an internship at the National Oil Corporation, which was my first foray into a workplace, into a real, workplace. And I worked there for a few months, after which I was able to get a job at the Ministry of Energy, as it was called then. And thereafter, I worked as an associate in a London law firm for some time, and then came back to the ministry. By this time, it was called the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining. So that's everything I've done up until 2 years ago, when I got this opportunity under the Oxford Policy Fellowship. So working for the government was not only interesting, but challenging. In my country, Kenya, the government departments, ministries and such institutions usually get their legal support from the Attorney General's chambers. But it's only in recent years that they have found it useful to have someone in-house to deal with some of the issues, especially in niche fields, energy being one of them. So when I first started, it instantly felt like I was pushed into the deep end. I had to hit the ground running. And one of the things that, every lawyer will experience is, the huge difference between law as you studied it and law as you practice it. So at the ministry level, you do a lot of policy, a lot of contract negotiation, a lot of oversight. Whereas in the law firm, you're actually doing a lot of the contractual drafting, a lot of, taking instruction from clients. It's much more client facing than, I would say, the ministry. So that's been the big difference for me between working as a public lawyer or a lawyer in the public sector and in the private sector. And I've found I do prefer the public sector. I think where we are placed as Africans, a job is a job. And for me anyway, there's no job that's wasted. There's something you're there to learn, so learn it and move on. I think you have to be willing to adapt. You have to be willing to make use of what you have at your disposal. I'm not sure we have the privilege of saying, well, this might not be for me. You don't know until you try. So I would say whatever opportunities open up, take them and go from there. One of the things I found most challenging was managing the transition between the law as I studied it and the law as it is practiced. And I found this particularly challenging because when you leave school, or at least when I left school, I had this crazy ambition to change the world and to change it immediately. But then you discover that, in the real world, it's not always as straightforward. So that was a big challenge for me. Secondly, there's little guidance in niche fields, at least locally, and this can be very frustrating. Obviously, energy is no longer niche, and it's been around for a long time. But at the time when I was starting out, it felt a little bit lonely. So that lack of guidance can be a little bit frustrating. I think also it's impossible not to talk about the financial the financial cost of some of these programs, the financial cost of advancing your studies, it can be prohibitive, and that's a huge challenge. That is something I'd want to change. I think this can also be added on to the challenges, is that there weren't very many women around me at the time, or at least at my level. Perhaps the one or two who are there were, very, very senior and out of my reach. I have been in my office only to have somebody walk in and, ask for Mr. Nduta because they assume that it must be a man, or, see me and assume that I must be a secretary. It can be not just offensive, but also you realize that these roles are not traditionally associated with women. So, I'm very happy that over time, more and more women are taking up courses in energy, and not just from the legal side, but also in the sciences and STEM generally. I really do believe that there is nothing that women cannot do, but women cannot advance without the help and support of men. So it's really refreshing to see that, in as much as there's still a great deal of, patriarchy in the society, we also have men who are championing our causes, and I think that's something worth applauding. My advice to high school graduates is twofold. First of all, there is no pride in ignorance. So learn as much as you can, because information and knowledge are never wasted. In the first instance, read as much and as widely as you can. Make books your friend. In the second instance, I say, especially now in this internet age, make use of the vast resources that are available online, many of which are available for free. I have personally done a lot of self-learning and taken a number of certification courses online for free. And it's a very good use of time. Secondly, even though it may sound generic, but be mindful of the influences that you expose yourself to. Be mindful of the things you watch. Be mindful of the things you listen to. Specifically, I would urge high school graduates, especially because you're young and impressionable, is to surround yourself with people who are better than you, people who are smarter than you, people who are further along or ahead of you on paths that you would like to pursue. And, make it your business to observe them, to watch how they do what they do. I think this is critical, and it will go a long way. First of all, decide early the kind of person that you want to be, and invest in your character. Because, character is what will stand the test of time. Depending on how you define success, there are many opportunities to get there. But your character and your value system will act as a compass, and will help you, will guide you in terms of examining the opportunities that will come your way, and will help you navigate these opportunities once you take a decision. Don't wait to be in a crisis. Don't wait for that moment, so that you can take a decision in terms of who you are and what your values are, because at the point of crisis, you may not be equipped with the tools to make a good decision. Secondly, there is no substitute for hard work. There is just no way to mitigate. So work hard. Aim to develop your technical expertise in terms of the things that lawyers do: legal writing, drafting, legal research, conducting client interviews. These are skills that can be improved upon. So, put in the time. While you're at it, be faithful with the small things, because the small things do actually make way for the bigger things. Now that I have some experience and I've come into some managerial responsibilities, I realize that especially in this profession, it's difficult to come across someone who is not at least book smart. So intelligence is not the issue, but the distinguishing factor will always be the attitude that one possesses. And I think a good attitude is one that's, a teachable attitude, an attitude that's able to receive correction, an attitude that can push back meaningfully, an attitude that can recover and keep pushing, put in the time, go the distance. A good attitude is priceless. Finally, I would say be gracious with your wins and measured with your failures. If my journey is anything to go by, then you will have both highs and lows. And you need to cultivate the ability to take them both in your stride. When you do well, because you will, take a moment and celebrate yourself. Pat yourself on the back, be proud of yourself. But when you fail or when you do poorly, because you will, then remind yourself that recovery is everything. Learn the lesson and keep it moving. You have to keep it moving. In the next 5 to 10 years, professionally, I would like to keep growing in terms of people and project management. I'm enjoying building teams and working with teams that I populate, and I'm finding that to be very meaningful. My dream is to continue to work on the development of the Africa energy sector. And I'm always keeping an eye out for opportunities that can facilitate that. Specifically, I'm interested in contributing to the global efforts pertaining to the energy transition. And this is the transition from the use of fossil fuels to more renewable energies. And whilst I do appreciate the push towards the increased use of renewable energy and the funding of those projects in a bid to manage the greenhouse gas emissions and to better manage, the global warming crisis and, climate change. I think that countries in the developing world, especially in Africa, have, and, like in Africa in particular, have contributed so little to the current state of affairs that we shouldn't be penalized for wanting to utilize the full breadth of our resources, including fossil fuels, towards our economic growth and development. So there must be a balance, and I would like to contribute to efforts towards finding that balance. I'm also involved in different projects which seek to empower women in the ASM sector. This is artisanal and small-scale mining. And I would very much like to see these projects grow. But at the same time, I think success must be holistic. And, therefore, even as I pursue progress in my professional life, I'm also very keen to pursue progress in other spheres of my life. I would not want that other spheres of my life become deficient as a result of my professional pursuits. I really don't want to be a good lawyer and a bad person. I think mentorship can be useful, and I would certainly be open to engaging anyone who would like to have me as a mentor to the extent that they think I can be helpful to them. This is something I would be open to doing. But my personal experience is that I haven't had the pleasure of engaging with a mentor formally. A few years back, when I did approach a few people, these people did not have the capacity in terms of either their availability or interest. So that was that. But I'm a firm believer in working with what you have. And I've found that I learn quite well by observation. So when I have come across people who I admire and people that I am curious about, I spend a lot of time observing them and trying to figure out how they do what they do in a bid to emulate that. And that has served me very well. I also have a few very strong characters around me, and they have been instrumental. They have really helped me just by being around them and watching them. Outside the professional field, my parents are phenomenal people, and my father has been instrumental in shaping my thinking and in helping me establish my personal standards. I grew up in a very peaceful home where it was ingrained in us that it is actually possible to rise to the level of your aspirations, and that problems have solutions, even though sometimes it takes time to get there. So that is something, is someone or people who I credit very much with who I am today. In terms of the profession, the person who gave me my first real job, he was the then permanent secretary of the Ministry of Energy in Kenya, as it was known then. His name is Patrick Nyoike, and I met him whilst I was an intern at the National Oil Company. And he was, I mean, we've since lost touch, but I remember him as a terrifying man. But somehow I worked up the courage to approach him and pitch my CV, and he gave me a job. And though I never got close enough to ask him why, just having the opportunity to watch how hard this man worked was compelling. And I remain deeply grateful to him for giving me a chance, because it changed my life. It changed my course. Nobody has a monopoly on success, or in terms of success. Success, I do believe, is a matter of personal definition. So even though I have pursued and enjoyed a very traditional path as a lawyer, it does not mean that this is the only path to success. Everybody has their dream, everybody has their ambition, and I think if you really believe in something, then you give it your best shot. So go for it.